We begin with the words of the Reverend Deborah Hafner. You are welcome here. If you are straight, gay, lesbian, bisexual, intersexual, demisexual, pansexual, or asexual, or resist labels completely, you are whole and welcome here. If you are transgender, non-binary, genderqueer, or cisgender, you are whole and welcome here. If you are confused about your sexuality, have questions, struggle in an intimate relationship, or struggle because you aren't in one, you are whole and welcome here. If you have been the victim of sexual abuse, sexual harassment, or sexual assault, you are whole and welcome here. If you have made sexual decisions or had behaviors that you regret, you are welcome here, and we will help you offer restorative justice and healing to those you have harmed. Your sexuality is holy and sacred and an integral part of who you are. You are whole and welcome here. As Unitarian Universalists, we will side with you, love you, and fight for your rights. We will seek to create a world where sexuality and sexual diversity is celebrated with holiness and integrity. And with that spirit in our hearts, let us worship together. I invite you now to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our opening hymn. There's a river flowing in my soul. It's number 1007 in the Teal hymnal if you want to sing there.
There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my soul, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my soul. There's a river flowing in my heart. There's a river flowing in my heart, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my heart.
My mind.
There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing in my mind, and it's telling me that I'm somebody. There's a river flowing in my mind. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing. There's a river flowing in my soul.
Please be seated.
With the kindling of this flame, we reaffirm our commitment to accept life's gifts with grace and gratitude, and to use them to bless the world in the spirit of love. Now, will you please join me in reciting our covenant, first in English and then in Spanish. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest for truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, thus do we covenant. La doctrina de esta iglesia es el amor. La búsqueda de la verdad es su sacramento y el servicio es su oración. Vivir juntos en paz, buscar el conocimiento en libertad, servir a la humanidad en comunión. Este es nuestro pacto. Good morning. I'd like to welcome everyone to Emerson Unitarian Universalist Church, named after the Unitarian minister and great American writer Ralph Waldo Emerson. We've been an active congregation here in the West Valley for more than 65 years, and we're proud of our roots as open-minded, progressive, and inclusive. My name's Julie Borden, and I'm happy to be your worship associate today. It's good to see those of you who are here in person, and I want to welcome those of you who are joining us online as well. The Reverend Elizabeth Mount says, "More sacred than any other individual need is choice. The right to know oneself, the right to know what you are ready for, what you need, to stretch when you can, to pause when you will, to know your body, your mind, your spirit better than anyone else, and ultimately to be trusted with the responsibility of your own living." Today, many of us are worried about reproductive justice. As Unitarian Universalists, we believe that people have a right to make choices about their own bodies, about their own lives, choices that are under imminent threat of being taken away. And we also push back against those who claim to care for the lives of the unborn, who say they believe in the sanctity of life, but then seemingly disregard their well-being after they are born, leaving children and families without care and support when they need it most. This morning, we lift up both our right to make sacred choices and the importance of caring for the sacredness of life. So welcome everyone who's here today, both virtually and in person. It's good to be together this morning. And we're going to move along and take our offering. We know that our financial contributions to this congregation come from sacrifice and hard work, especially during hard times. We're grateful for this and commit together to ensure the funds we gather collectively do a greater good for ourselves and our world than they could have done alone. May there be an offering to sustain and grow the life and mission of this congregation. May we give in love and in hope. So will the usher please come forward, and for those of you online, there'll be instructions in the chat about how to give. Thank you.
From you I receive, to you I give, together we share, and from this we live.
We take time in our service each morning to lift up the joys and sorrows from within our community and in the wider world. This week in our virtual Book of Life, Dave and Sandy Ginsburg share that member Ringdahl is back in the hospital and still needs prayers for recovery. And also thoughts and prayers to Pat Lindenauer, who continues to struggle with cancer. In a moment, I'm going to ring this singing bowl. And after I do, I invite you, those of you who are here in this room, to speak into the space, or if you're joining us via Zoom, to write in the chat any joys or sorrows, any names or occasions that are on your heart this morning, and which you would like lifted up into this community. All that has been named, all that has been shared, we offer into the embrace of this beloved community. I invite you to join me in a time of meditation or prayer, which we enter into with the words of Wendell Berry. We clasp the hands of those that go before us, and the hands of those who come after us. We enter the little circle of each other's arms and the larger circle of lovers, whose hands are joined in a dance, and the larger circle of all creatures, passing in and out of life, who move also in a dance, to a music so subtle and vast that no ear hears it except in fragments.
All this joy,
All this sorrow,
all this sorrow,
all this promise,
all this promise,
all this pain,
all this pain,
such is life,
such is life,
such is being,
such is being,
such is spirit,
such is spirit,
such is love.
such is love.
Sing that with me. All this joy,
All this joy,
all this sorrow,
all this sorrow,
all this promise,
all this promise,
all this pain,
all this pain,
such is life,
such is life,
such is being,
such is being,
such is spirit,
such is spirit,
such is love.
such is love.
These words are from Greta Jo Seidel. Everyone loves someone who had an abortion. And let's talk about the flip side. If you had an abortion, you are loved. If you've never told a soul, or if you've shared your story regularly, you are loved. If you are confident in your decision or wonder if it was the right choice, you are loved. If you are a queer, non-binary, trans, two-spirit, or cis woman, you are loved. If you are child-free by choice or want to have kids eventually, you are loved. If your choice was driven by medical viability or your own emotional health, you are loved. If you found a provider to care for you or had to rely on yourself, you are loved. If you were always pro-choice, or if your choice conflicts with your beliefs, you are loved. If you love your body or are still angry with your body, you are loved. If you believe God loves you, or you believe in nothing divine at all, you are loved. If you find yourself reflected here, or your truth is more than words can express, you are loved. Now, please rise in body or in spirit and join us for singing hymn number 1053, How Could Anyone?
How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected in my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you were anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you were less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul.
Our second reading this morning comes from the Methodist pastor David Barnhart. The unborn are a convenient group of people to advocate for. They never make demands of you. They are morally uncomplicated, unlike the incarcerated, addicted, or the chronically poor. They don't resent your condescension or complain that you are not politically correct. Unlike widows, they don't ask you to question patriarchy. Unlike orphans, they don't need money, education, or childcare. Unlike immigrants, they don't bring all that racial, cultural, and religious baggage that you dislike. They allow you to feel good about yourself without any work at creating or maintaining relationships. And when they are born, you can forget about them because they cease to be unborn. You can love the unborn and advocate for them without substantially challenging your own wealth, power, or privilege, without reimagining social structures, apologizing, or making reparations to anyone. They are, in short, the perfect people to love if you want to claim you love Jesus, but actually dislike people who breathe. Prisoners, immigrants, the sick, the poor, widows, orphans, all the groups that are specifically mentioned in the Bible, they all get thrown under the bus for the unborn. And now we have a song, a recorded song.
Some folks believe a life begins when egg meets sperm, and want to force all pregnant women to carry to term, but their actions point to something that you wouldn't expect, that they think kids only matter when they're not born yet. They'll make sure family leave and childcare funding fails, take away their parents at the border and jail, kids beg for climate action under crippling debt, while you show them they only matter when they're not born yet. If abortion was the issue, contraception would reduce it, whoa. But wouldn't you know, certain people made it difficult for everyone to use it, whoa. Publicly shame them if they can't afford lunch, refuse to keep schools safe from COVID or guns. For once I wish their actions would disprove what I've said, that they think kids only matter when they're not born yet.
I mean, that's basically half my sermon right there. Amazing what you can put into 1 minute. One evening, while I was working late at the office, I heard a loud, urgent knock on the office door. I opened it to find a distressed woman in her 20s walking away. She was pushing a stroller with a wailing infant. She turned around, relieved that someone had come to the door. And she started talking quickly. She wanted to know about the Child Care Resource Center on our campus. She was staying in emergency housing in the neighborhood and needed child care so that she could go to the job interview she had lined up the next day, and a caseworker had told her to come here. I explained that we were the church and the child care center had already closed for the day. But I invited her into the office anyway. She asked to use the bathroom and to change the baby, and if it was okay with me if she fed the baby. And while she fed him, we talked about our situation. I explained that unfortunately this Head Start preschool was actually only for kids 2 and older, and it wasn't the sort of place where you could just drop them off. She looked dejected, faced with yet another hurdle in her attempts to get her life back on track. I offered to hold the baby while she made a call to her caseworker. I felt bad. I felt bad that I didn't have much to offer beyond a brief respite, a listening ear, and some thoughtful words. Yet I also knew that I wasn't the one failing her and her child, nor was it her overextended caseworker. It was our society, our social safety net, or lack thereof. And it really illustrated to me one of the many ways that society does not make it easy to raise a child. Our service this morning is called Viable because Roe versus Wade, the Constitution or the Supreme Court case, established the constitutional right to an abortion before fetal viability, the earliest age at which a baby could survive outside the womb. But let's flip the concept of viability on its head and ask the question, how viable is it raising a child in this society? Of course, there's the immediate crisis of a shortage of formula, but there are longer-standing issues like the U.S. being the only wealthy country without paid parental leave, or that we don't offer universal child care, and child care often costs more than college. Not that college should be expensive either, considering how much student loan debt people are carrying these days, something that carries over into their ability to have kids, in fact. Thankfully, at least public school is free for all of those years in between preschool and college, although our kids now have to practice active shooter drills in case their school might be the next Parkland or Uvalde, because we can't seem to pass sensible gun control laws. And all parents, particularly black parents, deserve not to have to worry about whether their child will be hurt or killed. That's reproductive justice. So is having a future that you want your children, that our children will want to live in. Yet around 40% of young people fear bringing children into this world because of climate change. How viable is raising a child? It's no wonder that birth rates in this country have fallen over the past decade and a half to lows we have never seen before. Yet that woman who knocked on my door wanted that child. But we were still failing her and her baby. And now with Roe versus Wade likely to be overturned by the Supreme Court before the end of the month, as many as 26 states will be are expected to ban or severely restrict abortion, forcing countless women and other folks who bear children. This morning I will often use the word women, but we recognize that people of all different genders can have children. Forcing countless people to carry to term pregnancies they don't want. And let's be clear, the effects of this will be felt unequally, depending on the state you live in. But of course, the people who have the money and resources will be able to travel to California, or New York, or Illinois, or Minnesota, or Washington, D.C. So it's the people who can't afford to travel or to take time off who will be bearing the greatest part of the burden, who will be the most impacted. It's going to hit poor people and people of color hardest. So if people who want to have kids are struggling, imagine what it must be like for those who don't want to have a child at that time. Now, there are valid and understandable arguments people have for opposing abortion. That's one of the things that makes this so tricky. There are many people who know that that isn't the right decision for them, and for many it comes out of their religious beliefs. Although there's a lot more nuance in religious teachings about reproductive choices than we often think. Even the Bible, which many evangelical Christians turn to as the foundation for why they believe abortions should be illegal, even the Bible is not so clear-cut. The two passages upheld by abortion opponents are Psalm 139, verse 13, and Jeremiah chapter 1, verse 5. The first one, Psalm 139, reads, "For it was you who formed my inward parts. You knit me together in my mother's womb." Similarly, Jeremiah reads, "Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. And before you were born, I consecrated you." But as the Reverend Bob LaValle points out, there are other passages which indicate that a fetus is not a person. Exodus 21 verses 22 through 25 describes a situation in which a pregnant woman who intervenes in a fight between two men is injured and suffers a miscarriage as a result. The penalty of that is just the payment of a fine, which would not have been possible if a human life had been taken. It is treated as different. Then Numbers chapter 5, verses 11 through 31 is about if a husband suspects that his wife has committed adultery, can take her to the priests, and they will make her take a potion that, if she is guilty, will make her womb discharge and her uterus drop. If she is not guilty, then she shall be immune and be able to conceive children. As usual, LaValle says, the Bible is full of gems and wisdom and ethical teaching, and it's also a hot mess that contradicts itself over and over. For Judaism, the rabbinical teachings and legal code established over millennia make it clear that the fetus is considered part of the mother and it has no rights. And all four non-Orthodox Jewish movements, Reform, Reconstructionist, Conservative, and Humanists, are on record as opposing any governmental regulation of abortion. In Islam, the Quran teaches that the soul only enters the fetus at around 120 days, or roughly 4 months after conception. Buddhism teaches that abortion may sometimes be the best decision and a truly moral choice. Now, that doesn't mean there's nothing troubling about abortion for Buddhists, but it does mean that Buddhists may understand that reproductive decisions are part of the moral complexity of life. So it's not clear-cut, and as individual Unitarian Universalists, we too may hold many differing beliefs about abortion. Yet, we as a religion, as a whole, in our 2015 In 2015, our Unitarian Universalist Association adopted a statement of conscience on reproductive justice. It's a pretty long document. You can find it on the uua.org website if you'd like to read it in full. But I just wanted to share an excerpt. Unitarian Universalists support gender equity, positive sexuality, diverse sexual expression, and the individual's right to make reproductive choices. Such choices are influenced by social and political systems, as well as by factors such as racial, cultural identity, economic status, immigration/citizenship status, relationship with the justice system, health status, and ability. Our religious tradition directs us to respect the diversity of faith traditions that surround us and insists that no singular religious viewpoint or creed guide the policies of our governments. Our pluralistic congregations include diverse beliefs, backgrounds, and personal stories. Yet we unite in striving to live out the values and principles that call us to work for reproductive justice, in spite of the complexities of the issues. End quote. As Unitarian Universalists, we understand that people have diverse beliefs, but because we believe in the right of conscience and believe and uphold bodily autonomy, we trust that people can make the right decisions for themselves and for their bodies. Now, one of the things that opponents of abortion often talk about is the fact that, well, maybe people don't actually make the right decision, and that a lot of people regret the decision, that maybe they can't trust their own wisdom. And so they regret it, or maybe they experience depression or a loss of esteem after the abortion. But it turns out that number is actually very low. And we know that as the result of a fairly recent groundbreaking study called the Turnaway Study, which examined the effects of women who had either received or been denied a wanted abortion. The largest study of its kind, the researchers followed 1,000 women seeking abortion from 30 facilities all around the country over the course of 5 years, and compared the trajectories of the women who received a wanted abortion to those who were turned away because they were too far along in their pregnancies to get the abortion. And what the study found was that the vast majority of women who received an abortion said they did not regret having an abortion, around 95%. And contrary to, I think, what many of us have been taught, that it can be a really challenging decision, and it is for many, but they found that some 2/3 felt little or no emotion. And the most common feelings were actually relief and acceptance. And these women who had received the abortions were on the whole better off. Conversely, the women who had been denied abortions were 4 times more likely to end up living in poverty and 3 times more likely to end up to be unemployed. They had worse credit scores and more debt. They were more likely to have experienced bankruptcies and evictions, and years later were more likely to not have enough food to cover basic living expenses, or wouldn't have enough money, to cover basic living expenses like food, housing, and transportation. And so although these groups were economically similar when they had sought an abortion, only one group became poorer. Women unable to terminate unwanted pregnancies were also worse off in health, experiencing more hypertension and chronic pain. And moreover, while none of those who received an abortion died, 2 women died following delivery. A reminder that maternal health is is at much greater risk from a pregnancy than from an abortion. So much of which is also due to failures in our healthcare system. And the ones denied an abortion were also more likely to stay in contact with abusive partners, putting them and their children at greater risk. They had higher rates of anxiety and lower self-esteem, less likely to have ambitious life goals, and they were more likely to be raising children alone without the support of family members or partners. And it's not just the women who are impacted. A large proportion of people seeking abortions are already parents, but maybe don't have the means to support another child. Or maybe they don't want to have a child with an abusive partner. And so they're prioritizing the well-being of their child or their children who are already born. While others perhaps had a wanted child later. And those children from those wanted pregnancies, born both before and after their parent had had an abortion, experienced greater economic security, better maternal bonding, and stronger childhood development. Yet anti-abortion laws, they just flat out don't consider what it's like for someone who is pregnant when they don't want to be, and what happens to their life. So many of the people who have been cheering the likely overturning of Roe versus Wade seem to embody the message of that song, "Children only matter if they're not born yet." And I'm certainly not the first person to point out that many people who call themselves pro-life support the death penalty, support wars that ruin untold lives, are against universal health care that would lead to healthier mothers and children, longer lifespans, and often favor cutting programs like SNAP, which make sure kids have food to eat. And they seem to have no problem pulling parents and children apart at the border, or locking up parents for minor offenses away from their children in jail, or for housing children in cages. Or in Texas, where they've passed a law that could result in social workers tearing apart families simply because the parent is supporting their trans and non-binary child. That is a law on the books right now. Parents treating their child by the gender that they identify as can be taken apart, deemed as unfit parents. And there are fears that the Supreme Court, following on this, could strip away the rights of same-sex couples to adopt or foster children. And they don't seem to care that maternal mortality, where the mother dies from childbirth, is between 2 to 10 times higher in the United States than it is in other similar countries. 2 to 10 times higher. And those mortality rates are more than twice as high still for Black women. Nor is there care for safe environments or a livable climate for the world that the unborn will be born into. And so, during this time of change, of upheaval, where our voices will be necessary, I think we need to look at this more expansive picture of what reproductive justice is. Not just the right of choice, but also of access the inequality of access, and care for children beyond the point where they're born, care for their parents, care for human beings for their whole lives. That's that vision we need to keep in our hearts and our minds. And I know as I've been delivering this sermon, I've just been kind of feeling the weight of all of this. I don't know about you. I imagine some of you too, but I've been feeling the weight of this bearing down on me. And I do take some hope, some satisfaction, knowing that here in California and in many other states, they are expanding access, trying to make it possible for people who may be traveling from out of state, to help them with financial support, to make sure that no one can be prosecuted for receiving or giving an abortion. And I also take hope in the fact that it won't be like it was before 1973. There's been a huge shift in in what's available through the abortion pill, which is technically actually two. And many other countries, Mexico in particular, which until recently had very limited rights. That was what the movement there in Mexico was, basically getting people access to these pills. And so there's movements underway which are accessible even to people in states where it has been made illegal. Abortions that one can manage on their own. And so I find some hope in that. And yet knowing that we as Unitarian Universalists need to continue to fight for our values, to show up with love and care and compassion as we live out our first principle, respect for the inherent worth and dignity of every person, no matter where they are in life. I close once again with the words from that statement of conscience on reproductive justice. The world we envision includes social, political, legal, and economic systems that support everyone's freedom of reproductive choice, an expression of gender identity and sexuality, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. In such a world, all communities are places of equality, abundance, and safety, free from violence, oppression, and hazardous environments. This world includes access to safe, affordable, and culturally and developmentally appropriate child care and health care. In our vision, everyone has access to accurate information about sexuality and family planning and safe, healthy, and culturally sensitive reproductive health services. End quote. So as we enter into a post-Roe world, let us hold that expansive vision in our hearts. And may it be so. I invite you now to rise in body or in spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, number 131, Love Will Guide Us.
Love will guide us, peace has tried us, hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night. If you cannot sing like angels, if you cannot speak before thousands, you can give from deep within you. You can change the world with your love. Love will guide us. Peace has tried us. Hope inside us will lead the way on the road from greed to giving. Love will guide us through the hard night.
I invite you to remain risen in body or in spirit. Thank you to everyone who made this service possible. And I want to invite folks, once again, I mentioned it last week, but today there's a Interfaith Solidarity Network for the San Fernando Valley is having its fourth annual, or I guess not quite fourth annual, we missed a couple years there, but fourth Interfaith Solidarity March, which is going to be up at, starts from Zelza Park up in Granada Hills. You can find out more information at interfaithsolidaritynetwork.org or in our e-blast that went out this past week. And it's an opportunity for us to get together with the interfaith community to speak up really against many of the things that I was talking about this morning in our service about, making sure that our children and others are safe from gun violence, making sure, combating racism, making sure that we have a healthy environment for all of us to live in, including future generations. And so I hope to see you there. There's going to be a march. There will be music later and some wonderful food. The Sikh community always provides some amazing food at the end. So I hope to see you there. And now I leave you with the words of the Reverend Shelley Page. But as I do, I invite you to just reach your hands out. Just put that, I guess we're still not holding hands yet, but you just put that energy out into the room, out into the space. If you are cross distance, let that energy spread out as far as it can. Let us feel connected to one another. First, listen and learn from those whose lives are so different from yours. Then passionately speak for justice on behalf of all, that all may live in health, wholeness, and love. Blessings for the journey.
Genesis 2:7. Life begins with the first breath.
I just wanted to invite everybody to stay for coffee hour afterward. Thank you.
So, I think I don't know if Reverend Matthew will go for it or